Hey, what is going on, guys? This is Estimate B Reviews, and today we are going to be reviewing the newest album from Mike Posner titled A Real Good Kid. Let's get to it. I'll be upfront and say I really don't have any experience with Mike Posner. I obviously have heard I Took a Pill in Ibiza, but besides that, not really listened to anything else. So this is my first exposure to him, and I think that I prefer to do it this way. I considered going back and listening through some of his past discography, but this album seems to be something different for him. Maybe not necessarily stylistically, but this seems to be him trying to make a different sort of album. And unfortunately, it doesn't start on the best foot, because the very first track is an introduction track where he pretty much tells you, if you can't devote 40 minutes to listening to my album without interruption, then just don't listen to it right now. And it's a little pretentious, I have to say, and I was put off by it initially. But then once I dug into this album, honestly, my perspective totally changed. It never came across pretentious on any other song. It's actually a very deep and introspective album that deals with a lot of personal stuff. He deals with the death of his father on the second track on this album, which is incredibly moving, and really he does a good job. We also talk about other losses, like the loss of one of his big musical idols, Avicii. It's a really very personal album, and so I think that that's part of why I don't feel necessary to go through his past stuff, because this seems to be really looking at Mike Posner and his personality and his life. This is introspective and personal, and we get a real snapshot into his life. While this album does have a few weak points, it's still very personal, and it really does come through. I thought that going into this album, I'd probably find it to be very fake deep, which is something that I've criticized other artists in his similar vein. Ironically, Nash just last week. But honestly, Mike Posner strayed far away from that. Like I said, the second track, January 11th, 2017, talks about the death of his father. And such little details are so incredible to me. He talks about how some policemen came in and they wouldn't take off off their shoes. And it's just that strange attention to detail is something that really does stick with you in times of hardship. You remember the most little and insignificant detail, things that don't really matter. It also kind of reflects how he didn't feel that they necessarily really cared and were just relaying the information. So it's a very introspective and moving track that I absolutely loved. And so many of these tracks do that. And even if they don't hit quite a depth and emotional level that we got with that track, we get some really, really catchy songs. Wide Open, Songs About You, and Move On are three tracks that have been stuck in my head endlessly. Specifically, Move On. I find myself singing this non-stop since this album came out. It's a really catchy song. Song About You is it's ironic because obviously he's talking about how he doesn't want to write a song about someone while writing a song about them. And no, it's not necessarily the newest thing ever, but it's nice. It's a nice change of pace. And he never comes across pretentious, and I think that is so important because this kind of genre that he fits in does do that a lot. I know I bring up references to like John Bellion or Nash when I refer to these artists that try to be deep and don't really ever hit any real emotional depth, but he does it. And honestly, he doesn't even stick to one genre, and that's another thing I really enjoyed about this album. There were a lot of different sounds, and I don't really feel it possible to necessarily categorize him into just one genre, because we do have songs that are a little more folksy. We got pop songs. We have a little more traditional rock songs. Like, there's a good diversity in this album, and Mike Posner sells it really well. I seriously really did enjoy this album, and I was taken back because I didn't expect to like it this much. Now, I do have to say that this is an album that puts its best foot forward, because the first half is definitely really strong, and there are a couple good tracks sprinkled in the back half, but it does start to dip a little bit in quality. Drip, Staring at the Fire, and Perfect are three tracks that don't stand out quite as much. Perfect is just a little too long, almost 6.5 minutes, so it does overstay its welcome. But it's not that I don't think he's possible of writing good, long-running songs, because How It's Supposed to Be is about 5.5 minutes, and I really do like that song. Ultimately, I was really taken aback because I expected to go into this and not really enjoy it. I mean, I was going in with an open mind, but I had a hunch that I knew what this would be like. And actually, I was pleasantly surprised. No, it's not the greatest album of all time, and I feel like I've talked more about the positives, so my rating may seem a little weird, but that's because it's not necessarily a single thing that can be pointed to that's wrong. It's just some cylinders aren't always firing. Ultimately, it's a really good album that I definitely enjoyed. It was much better than I thought it would be, and I'm happy to give this a 7.5 out of 10. But what did you guys think of this album? Please let me know down below. Also, is there anything I can do to improve the quality of my videos or any upcoming albums you'd like me to check out? I really appreciate you watching. It really does mean a lot to me, and I'll see you guys later.